France, we have 80% of our electricity coming from zero carbon source. Renault has been through very tough times through the Carlos Ghosn affair in Tokyo. Economy has recovered, but the automotive market has not recovered yet, and I'm not sure it will recover fast. German industry again has taken the lead now in Europe on the electrification. Norway is the only country where electric vehicle is cost less than buying a diesel vehicle from the same brand. Hydrogen is developed in a big way because everybody believes that it makes sense for the future, and it would provide a much faster and simpler charging system than the full electric battery vehicle.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Freewheeling with the Experts, where we interview automotive industry experts to get interesting insights and new perspectives. Our guest today is Mr. Sylvain Bilaine, who has 30 years of international experience in the automotive business. Having lived and worked in countries like the United States, Japan, Italy, and India, apart from his home country, France. In Japan, Sylvain was one of the 25 pioneers with Carlos Ghosn in reviving Nissan Motors. And in India, he was the country general manager of the Renault Group when the company set up its India operations. He now consults the board and top management of various French and Indian automotive companies. And in this interview, Sylvain talks about the future and present of French auto industry and the opportunities for global suppliers. So let's get straight to the conversation.
Sylvain, France has been a pioneering country in the automotive industry in the world. And even today, it is one of the most important or the largest automotive markets in Europe as well as globally. So tell us about your take or your views on where is the French automotive industry today? What are the current updates? How do you look at it?
Oh, good morning, Sudhir. Nice to see you there. France at the moment is not in a good shape in terms of automotive industry. One of the reasons being that Renault has been through very tough times through the Carlos Ghosn affair in Tokyo. Mm-hmm. And Renault has taken a long time to recruit his new CEO, Carlos Ghosn. Yeah. And I think now they are back on track to recover. On the other side, Peugeot has been very active, acquiring Opel, and then merging with Fiat and Chrysler, which has made Stellantis the third largest group in the world. And it's fully consolidated. There's only one single manager, Carlos Tavares, who has been an excellent manager at Nissan and at Renault. And I'm glad that he could succeed in merging these five big players. So the second reason being the pandemic, losses of sales have been in the range of 20 to 25% over the last 2 years. And the market has not recovered yet. And personally, I would add a third one, which is the transition to a greener world and a carbon-free world. And the even as Renault has been a leader in the electric business, they've not been able to follow the followers who have been more active and more investing more money. And like Volkswagen has now a full set of vehicles, from the smaller one to the bigger one, including Audis. BMW has been quite active as well. And therefore, the German industry, again, has taken the lead now in Europe on the electrification. And in terms of markets, only Norway has a significant electric market. through huge government money. And in Norway, it's the only country where electric vehicle is cost less than buying a diesel vehicle from the same brand. Okay, so it's the kind of support is kind of $15,000 per vehicle for say a BMW 3 Series, something like that. So the transition is also difficult for the French market. Now, Stellantis is recovering through its strengths of multi-branding and technology coming from the US, from Europe. And but globally, the market is still 20% below what it was in 2018-19, and doesn't look like economy has recovered, but the automotive market has not recovered yet, and I'm not sure it will recover fast. On the other hand, the tier one guys, as in France, we have, let's say, five over $1 billion turnover, 5 players, Valeo, Faurecia, Plastic Omnium, Michelin, and they are all in very good shape with good profitability and good sales, because they have been around the world before the automotive industry itself, the car players, and they have worked with the German very early in the 90s. And like I would say for Valeo, for instance, Germany is their first market. And I would say probably China is their second market, thanks to the German auto industry. So these guys have been also more active in the transition. They've been working faster. And we will talk about it later, maybe in this interview. But basically, I would say our tier one, and therefore most of our tier two, in much better shape than the car players themselves.
Silva, the world is changing and we are all getting into clean mobility, new mobility era. And France has a leadership possibilities or even current positions in some of these. So tell us about the position of France and the French industry in the new mobility era, especially electric vehicles, hydrogen, fuel cells.
Okay, so yeah, I think it's just remind to everybody that it's a huge challenge. I mean, it's because it's scrapping everything we have done for the last 120 years in the auto industry and close the IC engine in a fast way, which means closing lots of investment and discarding this investment forever, and make a choice which is, I would say, in Europe, it has been made by the European Union, is go electric as fast as possible, and especially not only hybrid, but go as fast as possible to the battery electric vehicles. So the challenge is how you make something profitable from scratch when you have to invest huge investment on one side on technology, on plants and manufacturing. And second, you have to scrap everything that you had done before in the last 120 years, but the volume of production remains the same. So you have to do in few years what has been done in 120 years from the past. So it's a huge challenge. And it's a huge challenge, of course, for everybody. It's not that the rule is like that only in Europe, but Europe has tried to be a leader in that transition. And therefore, probably European players are going to suffer a bit more than, say, the Chinese or the American or Japanese. So in terms of what the French industry has done so far, just as a reminder, Carlos Ghosn had been one of the leader in building electric vehicles at Renault, which has done the a small vehicle, a small family vehicle, and has been the first in swapping batteries in Israel as a testing country, and the first to convert some of its IC engine plants into electric motors. And it was the first one to decide to make a battery plant, but the plan has been discarded. So, but the vision that Carlos Ghosn had was probably the right one, and it's not been followed actively. Secondly, on the Peugeot has been a very fast follower, and thanks to the strengths of the global business worldwide, they followed in making partnership for electric motors with Legrand, manufacturing now batteries. They have made their first mega battery plant, and they're building at the moment. And they have their huge supply chain for that purpose. And they are converting all the brands and all the kind of vehicles into battery electric, or some plug-in hybrids as well. So that's on the hydrogen. I think at the moment Europe is investing huge amount of money on making green hydrogen instead of gray hydrogen. In France, we have 80% of our electricity coming from zero carbon source, mostly nuclear plants and hydro electricity. And therefore, we can produce from electricity, we can produce hydrogen at a zero carbon or very low carbon footprint. So Renault has been creating a venture with an American cell maker, fuel cell, and they are starting for light commercial vehicles. They're going to start a full system with loading station and hydrogen production, and of course fuel cell manufacturing. And it's a very new venture, but in the last, say, 9 months, they have produced their first fuel cells, and they have inaugurated their first manufacturing plant. Mm-hmm. So suppliers, tier one, have been also very active. Valeo has been working on mild hybrids, full hybrids, and electric motors. Mm. Again, they have started with Siemens in Germany to make a venture on fuel on the electric motors. Now they have taken over 100% of the business recently. So they are well armed to go fighting on the electric vehicle. And last but not least, Plastic Omnium was a plastic maker, bumper maker, interior trim maker, has invested on fuel tanks for hydrogen. So the 700 bars fuel tanks made of fiber and carbon. And they are the supplier to the hydrogen vehicles from Hyundai, Korea. And they are going to be the suppliers to Renault and also to Stellantis Group on fuel tanks. So hydrogen is a new game, and it's promising as long as you have a decent electricity footprint for your electricity production in terms of how much carbon it would emit. In Poland, which is 190% carbon production, doesn't make sense to produce hydrogen. But when you have lots of windmills, when you have lots of solar plants, and you have nuclear plants, I would say, then your carbon footprint is really good, and you can afford making hydrogen from that. I think it's also out of the auto industry, it's also a very good way of a mobility for the low-speed trains and commuting trains. The one that are currently running on diesel. It's easy to convert into hydrogen. Now, also Airbus is working on 320 prototypes, which has one hydrogen motor and one kerosene motor on the other side. So that's hydrogen is developed in a big way because everybody believes that it makes sense for the future, and it would provide a much faster and simpler charging system than the full electric battery vehicle. And I would say, of course, you can merge also these two technologies. And I remember 3 years ago, I visited a very sensitive research center in France, and they had a small light commercial vehicle, which was an hybrid between a battery electric vehicle, electric motor, and a small fuel cell running on hydrogen. And the 1 kg of hydrogen would have the same range as a 300 kg of battery. So I know Mercedes is working on that as well for its larger SUVs, the 7-seater, but to make sure that you don't need to have a 75 or 80 kilowatt hour battery, and you can just add 2 or 3 kilos of hydrogen to make it a 600 to 700 kilometer range vehicle. So that's I think we may succeed in developing a full business from electrolyzing and producing green electricity, electrolyzing, recharge, being for the clients, final clients, and or industries, and then developing the vehicles and all the hardware on it, and distribution of the products and the technology. So I think that's it's a challenging change. Cost is not yet at the mark, and of course they need to work a lot on the mass investment and massive development, so that final cost to the client would be acceptable. Today, a Mirai is $75,000, which is the same cost as the upper Tesla vehicle. Whatever they make profit on that on both sides, I'm not sure, but at least we have a benchmark between the two technologies.
Okay, let us now look at the French vehicle industry from the supplier's perspective. One of the major events of last, let's say, couple of years has been the creation of Stellantis. First, Peugeot acquired the GM Opel business in Europe, and then they also have this now 2 large brands, and this whole new company has been created. Now, there must have been impacts, both positive and negative, on the supply chains, the individual supply chains of the erstwhile constituents, now that it has become one single company. So there could be opportunities as well as challenges. How do you look at it, and what's your perspective on this?
Yeah, I think first, a merger is a huge work for a company, in terms of bringing decent return to the stakeholders. It means it's not only acquiring equity or swapping equity on the side for the shareholders, but from an operational view, and I know Carlos Tavares is a very operational manager, you have to make sure that the addition of Fiat Chrysler plus Peugeot, Citroën, and Opel will bring return to all the stakeholders, meaning the employees, meaning the clients, meaning the shareholders, and of course the supply chain of these companies. So having worked on the several mergers or alliances, and having spent 4 years in Japan with Nissan during the first years of the alliance, I would say it's a difficult task to merge 5 companies together and having the result that you expect, which means a more effective manufacturing, a more effective supply chain, a more effective distribution system, and altogether bringing more value to your shareholders. So just to make it simple, let's just work on the talk about the operational systems. I mean, which is product development. How do you develop products? Do you work with platforms? Where do you develop platforms? Which tech center works on that? Then you have the manufacturing. So how do you run your manufacturing system in US, in Europe, in Asia, say China, India, and finally, there's also the distribution system. How do you sell your vehicles brand by brand in every country? Let's forget that for a moment and just concentrate on the manufacturing and supply chain. You have to work on how can you manufacture, say, a Citroën in China in a Chrysler plant? How do you work on manufacturing a Peugeot vehicle in the US for the Mexican, Canadian market? And how do you work with a new company? How do you bring a new company to each and every country where you have a strong position? So how does, let's concentrate on India. At this moment was Fiat Chrysler was in charge of the sourcing for South Asia in India, and now they will have to do the same job also for the Citroën projects, and maybe in the future for Opel projects or whoever wants to come to the country.
Yeah.
And therefore, once you find a good supplier, you want also to share that this good supplier is capable of producing for your other countries of distribution. So you may have a great crankshaft supplier in India, good forging and good machining. You've worked on the Fiat engine in the past. How do you translate that into cost reduction for the global business, and how do you bring this supplier to manufacture crankshaft for Europe and or to any other project in the world, like Morocco? Peugeot is also strong in Morocco, and they produce entry vehicle in Morocco. Therefore, it's a huge challenge for the car makers itself to merge these tech centers, manufacturing centers, and distribution and supply chain, of course. But once they get a reward, then the reward can be shared with everybody, and I don't know exactly, maybe they produce 8-9 million vehicles at the moment globally in the Stellantis group. And therefore, how do you translate, say, a 2 million vehicle manufacturer like Peugeot Citroën into a 9 million, but it's a 9 million globally. And therefore, having done that kind of job for Nissan in Japan, you can, we brought some of the European suppliers to Japan, to South Asia, to Thailand, Malaysia. And then we got some South Asian suppliers back into the system for the global market. So it's huge opportunities. It's long to build. It's a little bit of politics and a little bit of getting the trust from these suppliers that they will be able to go to the next level, which is the you produce from 1 million parts to 9 million parts. And how do you make sure that their logistics will be working, supplying Detroit, Paris, or Tokyo on their with their manufacturing based in there. So I think it's a huge opportunity. Of course, anybody that will not be capable of following the policies of the group will not be a player in the future, even in its own country, or may be just having no new opportunities to develop in its own country. So for the suppliers, it's a huge challenge, but it's a great opportunity because they can grow from being a local player, regional player, to a global player. I'm sure, people like Motherson are going to be the great winner of these opportunities, being already a supplier to the US business, being a supplier to the European business, and being mostly manufacturing their harnesses in India. And therefore, for some of these players who can go to the next step, it's a huge opportunity. And I'm sure some of the let's say top 20 Indian players are going to be challenged to grow their business to the next level, which is the global business.